Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Ruffman. I'm your host, John Ruffman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. One of the great challenges of doing this podcast is deciding what to talk about each morning. Believe me, I could do a dozen topics each day, but I want to focus today on something that should disturb all of us. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on the stand, and Dr. Fauci on the stand. And the question I'm going to ask is a very simple one. Who do you believe? RFK Jr. or Dr. Fauci? Now, I have to go back in my own mind 2 years ago when the question was, did you trust your doctor? And the answer is, I did. And if I needed a second opinion, my father, who was a physician, always said, if you're not sure, get a second opinion. And so we find ourselves in a fascinating moment. Dr. Fauci testified before Congress and took the Fifth Amendment. Why? Because Rand Paul, the senator from Kentucky, has announced that his intention is to convict Dr. Fauci of crimes committed during the COVID pandemic. And the question now is this: who do you believe? And then we had the situation just this last weekend where Dana Bash on CNN did an interview with RFK Jr. I must tell you, I didn't just listen to it once. I went back to listen to it 2 more times because I really wanted to hear what was being said by these 2 eminently qualified public spokespersons. Dana Bash, a reliable news source, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the Secretary of Health and Human Services for the United States of America. So I want to offer you some conclusions. First of all, I believe Dr. Fauci. Now, a lot of you will say, well, have you read all the material? Have you read all the literature? Yes, I've read books blasting Fauci, accusing him of crimes against all of us. And I have to tell you, it has no credibility with me. And I know that when you testify before Congress, if you make a slip, any kind of slip, or even a perceived slip, you can open yourself up to contempt of Congress, or even worse, legal proceedings for not having told the truth. Let me be crystal clear. I don't want there to be any ambiguity. If I had to trust the medical knowledge of Dr. Fauci versus the medical knowledge of RFK Jr., believe me, I would trust Dr. Fauci. And as for Rand Paul, he is, frankly, someone who has had peculiar theories for years, inheriting, I think, a lot of them from his father, who many of you will remember ran for president and was viewed by most as a kook. So where does this leave us in terms of public health? The question becomes, who do you trust? And will there be another pandemic? We are told by the World Health Organization, by physicians who I have interviewed and spoken with, that inevitably there will be another pandemic. There will be something else that will happen that will affect all of us. And who will I trust at that moment? By the way, the person who has just been nominated to take Dr. Fauci's old job is also someone who believes in conspiracy theories, who believes that, frankly, the pandemic was artificially created in a lab in China. Look, I don't know where the whole thing came from. Was it something created in a lab that escaped? Possible. But let's assume that were true. Does anybody in their right mind think it was intentional? Does anybody believe that a virus was created in order to infect the world? No, I am very clear about this. The important thing is that a vaccine was created. Now, I remember those days on KGO, and I'm sure many of you who were with me then remember them as well. And do you remember the cautionary note that I insisted on adding? That the vaccine did not prevent COVID. All it did was reduce the danger of COVID. And yet we have those who say, look, you said if we created a vaccine, all would be well. Nobody ever said that. And I went back. I looked at my notes from those days. And I know exactly what I said. And I know exactly what was said to the American people. Get the COVID shot, and you will experience reduced symptoms. There will be fewer deaths. And yet now we are confronted with the spectacle of the choice of whether we believe RFK Jr. or Dr. Fauci. So I want to be crystal clear. I believe there is no doubt that Dr. Fauci is the reliable source. I also understand why he took the Fifth Amendment. He took the Fifth Amendment because he knew that Rand Paul is out to get him. And you know what I've learned? Politics sometimes interferes with truth. I know that's sort of a shocking observation, but I think it's true. So if you ask me who I trust in all of this, believe me, it is not RFK Jr. And believe me, it is not Rand Paul. And believe me, it is Dr. Fauci. So let's get prepared for the fact that this is going to be an ongoing controversy. And what is most disturbing of all is that Donald Trump put Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the position of being the head of a department of government dealing with health and human services. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that RFK Jr. has a long history of opposing vaccines. I haven't even touched on the issue of the rise in measles. The reason, I believe, it is because of Dr. Fauci not being listened to. Fauci says, trust your vaccine. They've all been checked. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is not a doctor, says, no, don't get the vaccines. Oh, but now he's modified. Now he's modified what he's saying. He said, oh, yes, in the interview with Dana Bashan, have the vaccine for measles. But do you understand? It's only because he's backed into a corner. He's wrong. He's not a scientist. He doesn't know what he's doing. Dr. Fauci does. And the medical establishment knows the reality of vaccines. Thank God for vaccines. Think of all of the disasters in terms of our health services which have been avoided. And let me remind you of something. It has to do with the polio vaccine, which, curiously enough, RFK Jr. has also doubted. What was the one thing the Israelis did in Gaza, even in the midst of the war? They insisted on the vaccine regimen going to the children of Gaza. Why? Because we are smart enough, all of us are smart enough, to understand that getting a vaccine is critical. So let me ask those of you who have small children, are you getting your small children vaccinated? And the answer is, of course you are. Of course you're getting them vaccinated because you're not dumb, you're not stupid, and you understand that science has achieved a modern miracle. Many of the things which we were subjected to, which caused premature death and disaster, have been avoided because of the potency of vaccines. One of the things that disturbs me about the Trump administration is their lack of willingness to concede that it is important to have a vaccine. It should bother each and every one of us. So let me ask those of you who are younger and who are going to have children, will you make sure that your children are vaccinated? Are you going to make sure they're vaccinated? Are you going to make sure that they are treated as you have been treated in your lifetime? Whether it is measles or chicken pox or the 3 Rs, whether it is COVID, and the idea that we get a flu shot. Can you imagine? Of course we get a flu shot. There are different strains of the flu. They have to recreate this every year. But those who have historic memory understand that once upon a time, in 1919, the flu swept this country and caused deaths, all of which now might be prevented and might have been prevented then by a flu vaccine, which we didn't have, but we now have. The idea of gutting our scientific research when it comes to vaccines and public health is, to me, perhaps one of the greatest crimes the Trump administration has ever committed. There are a lot of things you can say about Donald Trump. Some people say things that are pro, others say things that are con. But the diminution and the decision to diminish the idea of vaccines is appalling. And are we seeing the result? You bet we are. We are seeing the result every day with the measles epidemic rising. We are seeing that when people doubt the scientific evidence that a vaccine works, it's a problem. So let's answer the question directly. Who do you believe? Dr. Fauci, RFK Jr., or Rand Paul? And I'm going to tell you right now, I agree with Dr. Fauci. I am a person who accepts science. It doesn't mean, and let me be clear, that science is perfect. It doesn't mean that every time a doctor renders a recommendation, that it's something that should be followed. That's one of the reasons why I always get a second opinion. That's why we should get second opinions. But I can remember the vilification of Dr. Fauci in print, on television, on the radio. Certainly those of you who listen to KGO know that there were many who called, who believed Dr. Fauci was a criminal, that he was responsible for all of it. There are some who even suggested that it was Dr. Fauci who was responsible for COVID itself. I wanted to devote a good part of this podcast to something that I believe with all my heart. If you go back to 1900 and you think about the limits on medicine, and then you think about where we are in 2026 and what medicine has accomplished, let me be clear. I trust the physicians. I trust our health care. It isn't perfect. Our doctors aren't perfect. But I want to be able to say with absolute confidence that by and large we are a healthier nation because of what our physicians have accomplished. And key among those is Dr. Fauci. His work on behalf of the American people and the people of the world deserves to be applauded, needs to be resoundingly approved. And the quacks, like Robert Kennedy Jr., and yes, Rand Paul, we need to disregard what they say and to use what they say for political purposes. Well, it just is beyond me. I want it to be beyond me. If you can't trust that a vaccine works, boy, are we in trouble. I wanted to spend the time this morning on this subject because I believe it to be so urgent. There are, of course, many other topics we can deal with, and we will. But be aware, if you have to choose between RFK Jr. and Rand Paul on one side and Dr. Fauci on the other, well, I go with Dr. Fauci. And any thinking person should be doing just that. Oh, and as for Donald Trump, this will be one of the great black marks on his administration. And it should be. I am John Rothman. You are listening to Around the Political World with John Rothman. And I want to thank you for tuning in. I'd love to hear your thoughts on today's episode. You can write me a review on Apple Podcasts, drop a comment on YouTube or Spotify, and click any of the links in the show notes to connect with me on social media. Remember, on Friday, just 48 hours from now, we'll be dealing with question and answers from you. I also want to point out, I did not talk about Iran and the question of the opening of the Strait of Hormuz today because it hasn't happened. But I think by tomorrow, we'll reflect on that and certainly on the elections which have taken place. Remember to share this episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. That, of course, is our goal. The show has been getting so much positive attention that we're excited to bring on advertising support. This will help us to create more opportunities for Around the Political World with John Rothman, and we hope you appreciate our sponsors as much as we do. And now, a special thank you to Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast. She does a great job, and thank you so much. This is John Rothman. I'll be right back with you tomorrow, right here on Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.